It all started with an idea. One of those ideas you only come up with when it's way past your bedtime, but you're still up for one reason or another. Something about being up late and not doing anything particularly productive drives your mind to some places they probably otherwise wouldn't be. But anyway, the idea was simple. Or, at the very least, the explanation of the idea was simple. To read and review every single Weekly Shonen Jump title ever put to print. The execution of the idea would be anything but simple. Shonen Jump has had hundreds and hundreds of titles from throughout its current lifespan of over 50 years. And although nowadays a lot more manga has been a lot more accessible with official translations, there are still plenty of manga with no official translations, and the way for obtaining these series is a complete mystery that I know absolutely nothing about. But even then, there are likely still gonna be a lot of series that slip through the cracks and simply have not left Japan. The reason for that being they just never got popular enough for a demand outside of its home country to even be generated. There's also the fact that there are a multitude of series that came out decades before there was any such thing as the internet, which has hugely contributed to the ease by which non-Japanese speakers can even hear about manga. And so basically, almost all manga that existed before the internet could be completely unknown to basically anyone who wasn't a kid at the time in Japan reading it while it was being published, unless you're one of those curious weirdos who want to investigate that sort of thing. So basically, I told myself, this is gonna be very difficult. I didn't want to say it was impossible quite yet. The internet is a magical place after all. Now, when I came up with the idea, I hadn't quite seriously considered executing it, but I still figured it'd be at least fun to try having a look at Shonen Jump's ancient history and reflecting on how the magazine has changed over the years. But I also figured that the older series that were not popular enough to get an anime or anything like that were probably going to be difficult to find, and or have a low quality fan translation. What I was not anticipating though was how much worse things really are. What I'm about to show you is every manga from before the 80s, the decade where Shonen Jump's reign over the manga industry began, with the introductions of Fist of the North Star, Dragon Ball, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and more. Basically, everything that you see in bold will be somewhat easy to find because it was very popular. So, yeah. The vast majority of these series are going to be pretty difficult to find. But, I thought to myself at first, they can't be too hard to find. I was sure that each one of these probably had a small cult following floating around somewhere on the internet. Whether that was a tiny dead Discord server, or a subreddit with no custom banner, or even an IRC group, or a series of 4chan threads that came along every once in a while. So, I decided to test the waters of how much effort would be required to look for one of these older manga series by basically picking one almost entirely randomly. The one I picked was called Ashita wa Tsukameru ka, which sort of translates to Can You Grasp Tomorrow? The title in itself is very intriguing to me. It sounds like a deep question about securing your future and how much control one has over their own life, which kinda touches a special place in my heart because I've been thinking about those same things recently. What I decided to do first was to just Google the manga title. And when you go to images, you see a lot of pictures of this slice of life anime called Ashita wa Doyobi, or Tomorrow is Saturday. It looks kinda cute, but it's not what I'm looking for. I looked up the title on Mal, got nothing. I looked it up on Analyst, got nothing again. Wikipedia would just give me the list of every Shonen Jump manga ever, which is where the journey started, so no dice there either. I also just decided to go to excuse me, Viz Media's official app where you can read a huge backlog of manga for only $3 a month. But no dice there either. So then I decided to look at the Wikipedia article for the manga's creator, Toru Shinohara. Apparently he's known for writing manga with very strong, beautiful, eye-candy female protagonists. And when you take a look at his list of works, there is no title called Ashita wa Tsukameru ka, or Can You Grasp Tomorrow, or anything like that. This was very strange to me. I then tried to switch the language to Japanese because oftentimes switching languages with Wikipedia will provide you with different information. And when you switch the language to Japanese when talking about manga or anime, you almost always get a bunch of details that the English version doesn't have. And surely enough, it not only goes more in depth about the history of his career, there are also more manga that were not mentioned in the English article. And it also talks about his experience as a filmmaker. But even still, there was no mention of Grasp Tomorrow. Then I found this site called Jump Archive, which is a fan-made database of all Shonen Jump series ever. And when I first clicked on it, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. But upon looking, the site had a very poor auto-translate thing going on with it. So yeah, and somewhat unsurprisingly, no new info was actually presented here either. All the description of the manga seems to talk about is the fact that Toru Shinohara made movies. There was also a picture of an issue of Shonen Jump here as well. This is what I thought was my very first look at this elusive series. Unfortunately, I didn't realize this at first, but this looks like it's just a collage of a bunch of different popular Shonen Jump series at the time. They do this all the time, even in the present. The site also tagged this series under human drama, which would be new information if it's true, but I'm not entirely sure if I can trust this site anymore. I went back to The Big List on Wikipedia, which had the exact issue of Shonen Jump where each series premiered. So what I did was Google that exact issue, and lo and behold, our actual first look at Can You Grasp Tomorrow? Usually, when a new Shonen Jump title is published, they put it on the cover to promote it, so obviously that's what happened here. Now, what's pretty frustrating is that even though I found this, I still don't actually know what the story is about. All I can possibly go off of is conjecture and speculation based on the feelings and ideas I think that the cover is trying to convey. I like the chromatic aberration, which subscribers of my channel would obviously tell I'm a fan of, because I use it in my intro and outro. The guy on the front is obviously the protagonist. It looks like he's running with purpose off to somewhere important, I guess. It looks like he's also holding something too. It looks like it could be a jacket or a bag or some kind of cloth. That girl in the background is probably a love interest. Old movies and manga tend to shove in a pretty girl who's just kinda there, so that's what I'm thinking she's there for. With all that can be gleaned from this one cover, there's nothing that we can concretely say about the actual premise of the story. As far as I know, not even the text tells you what's about to happen in the series, it's just telling you what other series are going to be there along with it. I got this cover from Comic Vine, a huge comic database with varying amounts of info about pretty much every manga and comic you can think of. Unfortunately though, there was no other new information about Grasp Tomorrow than this Jump cover. Another thing I found was this site called Jajanken, which records sales numbers, chapter information, and the rankings of popularity of all the Shonen Jump manga. It actually had the names of every chapter of Grasp Tomorrow, and when you translate them, a lot of the names have something to do with money. There's not much that this really adds, except for, of course, more opportunities to speculate about the premise of the story. The titles and their recurring theme of money lead me to believe that this story might have been about a poor guy trying to do shady operations and get money to secure his tomorrow, which is where the title comes in. I think that the young woman is probably a love interest, perhaps a first love, or maybe just some girl he's simping for, and maybe he wants to get rich so he can marry her. But speculation isn't gonna get me anywhere closer to finding this manga. What I eventually started to do is look on places like eBay, Amazon, Yahoo Auctions, plus some Japanese auction sites. The idea was that maybe while putting the manga up for auction, the seller took pictures of some of the pages inside, and some of these pages may have included Grasp Tomorrow. I only really expected for the issue of Jump with the debut chapter to have pictures, and it did, look. It's basically just the pic from the cover as a 2-page spread. But I found another spread of chapter 3. This one is actually quite a bit more interesting. You've got the main character plus a bunch of dudes in suits falling behind him in some sort of void with intersecting linear white streaks in the background. This has me more confused and intrigued. Is this metaphorical or literal? If it's metaphorical, what's the metaphor? If it's literal, is the main character in another black void or possibly the same black void in that first spread? Another thing I found was a blog made by a dude from Spain who had a friend who went to Japan and brought back an old issue of Jump. The Spanish dude just kind of looks at every issue published here, takes a picture, and then says a little thing he happens to know about each title. So we get a couple of important things from this. First, it's the cover page of chapter 6. Not as much to say about this one, to be honest. The guy looks off at something from a side angle. The girl is also there looking a bit shocked. And that's all that stands out to me right now. Oh, one random thing. Looking at these pages, the furigana indicates that the real title is Asu wa Tsukameru ka. This actually doesn't really affect the search too much, since there was no information on it when you spell it like that in English, but in Japanese, it's spelled exactly the same. So I'd say this is pretty minor. Anyway, the blog points out something that I was just kind of suspecting, but hoping wasn't actually true. That since Grasp Tomorrow had only 10 chapters, it probably had no volume release. Because I guess it's too many chapters to be made into one volume, but not enough to have 2 volumes. There's also this probability that this manga just wasn't very popular. In fact, the whole reason that it has only 10 chapters is more than likely because of its lack of popularity. The manga industry is a very, very competitive one, and if your series doesn't hit hard enough early on, then it could get the boot. And when you look at the data on Jajanken, it had pretty middling success. The thing is, I'm not actually sure if these numbers are really bad enough to get cancelled though. The one thing I did notice is that many manga first start out with a color spread, which draws readers in. When a manga is popular, it gets more chapters with color spreads, which likely draws more people in, and boosts its popularity even more. Grasp Tomorrow did not have a single color spread, and I really have no guesses as to why. I honestly feel like I'm missing some kind of extra variable that might explain why the series ended so soon and why there are no volumes. Maybe these ranked numbers are actually worse than I think. Maybe Shinohara was just unhappy with the story, falling out of love with it unexpectedly early. Maybe it's something else entirely. Okay, so cut in from Future Smizzle. Toru Shinohara had a manga also released in 1970 called Sasori, and that's kind of what established his current style of like the badass sexy heroine or whatever. And I think that maybe he canceled Grasp Tomorrow so that he could work on that, because it was probably that series that was more popular. But I'm not sure if like that's really what happened, because in 1971, while I'm pretty sure he was still working on Sasori, he had another series in Shonen Jump called Key Girl. So honestly, I'm not sure if any research I do will give me a good answer. One way I'd even be able to do more speculating is if I just read this story, which of course I have no means to. But now that I know that there was more than likely no volume release, that narrows down the search ever so slightly. Basically, now I don't have to waste my time looking for volumes. At the same time though, it means I have to take the more complex route of tracking down every single issue of Shonen Jump in which Can You Grasp Tomorrow was published. I had considered going on these auction sites I found and buying these issues myself, but there were a couple of problems. For one, each individual issue was going for 1,000 to 2,000 yen a piece, which is, oh, that's not so bad. But another problem is that a lot of these listings had already been sold or were unavailable. Plus, some of these Japanese sites with low prices don't ship globally, and the global prices like eBay are much more expensive, to the point where it comes into question whether spending that much money will actually be worth it. I also tried to look and see if there happened to be some site that just had scans of old Shonen Jump issues. This would literally end my journey right here and now, really, but unfortunately I found no such thing. If anyone does know of a site like this and I happen to overlook something, please let me know, because you'll be a lifesaver for it. What I still found curious was the fact that Grasp Tomorrow isn't on Shinohara's list of works on pretty much every site I could find. For a bit, I considered the idea that maybe it's been falsely attributed to him, because it doesn't have any of the tropes that he seems to be known for. But when you look at the pictures of the manga, it definitely shows the same name. I also considered it's maybe a lesser author with the same name, but the way Shinohara's first name is spelled is, if I'm not mistaken, an alternate spelling for the sake of style, or like a pen name or something. It's spelled with hiragana instead of kanji, and it seems like way too much of a coincidence for two manga artists to have the exact same name and stylize it in the exact same way. Surely one higher up or another would suggest one of them to change their pen name to something different, right? Plus, when you compare the art style of Toru Shinohara's other manga to Grasp It Tomorrow, you see a lot of the same little quirks between them. I think the reason might just come back to the fact that there was no volume release, which was probably because it wasn't very popular. Now, unfortunately, all this research and all this speculation might be as close as I'm getting to reading Can You Grasp Tomorrow. What sucks is that I know what I need to finally read this series, but I don't know if what I need is actually attainable. For the most part, I have two options. One, to buy the issues of Shonen Jump where this series was published, which would cost hundreds of dollars, or two, find a person or some people who already have these issues. The second option would be somewhat more difficult, because how likely is it that an English speaker has a bunch of manga from 50 years ago? There's also the possibility that I might have to contact up to like 10 people from all across the world. With either option though, I'd then obtain scans, which I'd have to give to a translator, which might also cost money. Now, I might end up buying the manga myself, but the thing is, there's no way I'm spending any money for a video with like 50 views. Hey, so another cut-in from Future Smizzle. I actually did do it. I broke down, and I saw an auction that had like 2 days left with no bidders on the issue with the first chapter of Grasp Tomorrow, and it was only 1,000 yen, $10, less than that, and I went and I bought it, and yeah. Plus, I have a little bit of hope that someone might find this video and have scans of what I'm looking for, or maybe at least know where to go or who to talk to. But even if you don't have a way to contribute to the search, consider sharing this video so that it can eventually reach someone who does. But whatever. Part of the point of this video was to point out to lost media searchers the fact that there's more or less a huge iceberg of manga that's just been lost to the sands of time, and hopefully this video will encourage people to start digging to see if they can find something even more interesting. During the search, I also found other manga that I didn't want to get sidetracked talking about, but did grab my attention, among them being The Human Condition, a manga adaptation of one of the most famous Japanese novels of the 21st century, Genyaku Seisho by George Akiyama, a mangaka who at some other point admitted he killed someone, and Wakai Arashi by Keiji Nakazawa, a man who survived the bombing of Hiroshima at the age of 6. Oh, and also decided to write a manga about it. There wasn't too much information about these series that I could find. If I talked about the info that I did find, it'd take up way too much time in this video. I might make some videos about them another day if there's any interest, so be sure to comment if you want to see that and subscribe to see when they do come out. And if you found anything about this video mildly interesting, please go to my Discord server in the description, because I honestly desperately need someone to talk about this stuff too.